Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. A massive next couple of days for Billy Napier, the Florida Gators, as it pertains to the transfer portal, as not only former five-star cornerback Cormani McClain on campus, but also former Arizona State wide receiver Elijah Badger. And for the Florida Gator fans who've been rocking with the fellas for the last couple of weeks, I mean, I've been just absolutely banging the table for Elijah Badger, not only as really being one of the better wide receivers available in the transfer portal, but more importantly, fitting what Florida wants to do on the offensive side of the football extremely well. Want to dive into Cormani McClain, dive into Elijah Badger, talk about what they could bring to this Florida Gators program. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, to the Florida Gator fans. I mean, it has been an absolute blast talking this program, whether it's in the portal, whether it's on the high school recruiting trail. In the amount of support you guys continue to show to the fellas, it truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. We hopped on Saturday afternoon as this news came out about Cormani McClain, gave you guys some of our takes. You guys gave us a ton of feedback in the comment section. Would love to hear more from you guys. We always learn a ton from you guys. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And let's start with Cormani McClain, where, again, we talked about it Saturday afternoon as this news emerged. And, over the last 48, 72 hours, I've been thinking a lot about this potential fit. And I think the more I think about it, the more I really like this fit for Cormani McClain. One, coming back home, being closer to family, I think is probably massive for Cormani McClain. I think a lot of Florida Gator fans and college football fans across the country look at a guy like Cormani McClain and say, the physical traits are there. If this is a kid that puts it together on the football field, he is going to be one of the better cornerbacks that you see in the country. So the upside is certainly there. And you talk about how can you get the best out of Cormani McClain, being close to home, kind of keeping him focused on football, keeping the first things first, if you would say. I think that's really important. And I think you look at Colorado, and I don't think the first things were always coming first for Cormani McClain. But I think secondly, I think this Florida program did a lot of thinking about this before they went out and decided to go after Cormani McClain, right? Cormani McClain didn't just hit the transfer portal 72 hours ago, right? He's been in the portal for the last couple of weeks. And what that tells me is, Billy Napier, this coaching staff, and potentially some veterans in the locker room probably had this conversation regarding, is Cormani McClain going to be a good fit? And for the fact that they're kind of turning up the heat now, it kind of tells you that the people within that program think they can get the best out of Cormani McClain. That also kind of makes me feel a little bit better about this. And I think thirdly, Cormani McClain is going to come into a Florida Gators roster that, as much as some of the on-field play for Florida has been frustrating in that 2023 year, you look at the locker room, you look at the culture, and you say, you feel pretty good about what's being manifested and created in Gainesville within that locker room. From a culture standpoint, I think that might be the biggest selling point for people who might be on the fence for Cormani McClain, where you get him into a locker room that has good culture, a lot of people that are focused on football, winning football games. That's probably the best thing for a guy like Cormani McClain. You talk about, Graham Mertz being a veteran quarterback that really seems to emerge as the leader within that locker room. And then you look at a young guy in DJ Lagway, where we always talk about the high upside play that DJ Lagway can bring. One of the more talented quarterbacks we've seen come out of the high school ranks. I think another thing that makes DJ Lagway special is you listen to the interviews, you see how he conducts himself, even in that spring game. This is a guy that is one of the best leaders in college football. So you look at the leadership within this program and say, you think it's there to kind of take in a guy like Cormani McClain and kind of get him straightened out. I think the last part is you just look at this secondary, the young talent in that secondary room, and say, you add Cormani McClain into that, you are getting one of the best young secondaries that you see in the country. You look at the cornerback spot, Jakeem Jackson, potentially Cormani McClain. You're bringing Jameer Grimsley as a transfer from Alabama in that 2024 class. Sharif Denson playing the nickel. Those are four guys that have all SEC caliber play written all over them. Then you look at the back end, Jordan Castell, Bryce Dorr, and I say, you bring in Cormani McClain, he's coming into a secondary room that is really one of the more talented groups in the country. That's going to make him more focused on football, just being around that elite young talent. the more I think about it, the more I'm kind of on board with Cormani McClain coming to this Florida Gators program. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section on that. And I think secondly, let's talk about Elijah Badger. And again, we've talked about Elijah Badger in the past. I think a couple things really stand out. One, I think we came away from that spring session for the Florida Gators, specifically that spring game, and say, Florida could probably benefit from having one more proven commodity in that wide receiver room where you know what you have in Eugene Wilson. In my mind, one of the best pure players in college football, quite frankly, certainly one of the best wide receivers in the SEC. You're bringing a guy like Napier, who I think is a really underrated ad. I think he gives a lot more value than some people across college football are giving him credit. But after that, it's not a ton of experience. It's a lot of young wide receivers. You put one more guy in Elijah Badger in that wide receiver room, you're suddenly looking at that Gators wide receiver room and saying, this is a pretty talented group. And obviously, there are a couple things to talk about with Elijah Badger, most notably the injury history. If that checks out and you don't have question marks about the health, or at least the question marks that you did have about the health might be mitigated after the team doctors look at him, you take a flyer on this kid all day long, because you go back to him at Arizona State. Not only is he satisfying that proven commodity veteran wide receiver coming into this program, he also really fits what Florida wants to do on offense, right? Predicated on getting the football to their playmakers in space. You look at how Eugene Wilson fit into that offense. It was primarily because Florida was doing a very good job getting him the football, letting him operate after the catch. You look at Elijah Badger, 26 missed tackles forced last year in 2023, elite with the football in his hands, has caught for over 1,500 yards the last 2 years. Over 800 of those yards have come after the catch. This is a guy that thrives with the football in his hands. And now you have Elijah Badger in that wide receiver. Now you got Eugene Wilson, Elijah Badger, two guys that are elite with the football in their hands. You have a guy in Napier who can work vertically down the field, manufacture some space for guys like Wilson and Badger. I think this is a perfect fit, not only from a veteran wide receiver proven commodity standpoint, but also, how Elijah Badger operates and how he could potentially operate in this Florida Gators offense. So I think the last thing I'd note is I think Elijah Badger is a true difference maker. And I think that you look at his time at Arizona State, particularly the last 2 years, and say, one, dumpster fire left by Herm Edwards. Two, the quarterback play was absolutely brutal. But Elijah Badger was putting up some really impressive numbers in an Arizona State offense that couldn't stay on the field, that could not push the ball down the field. What does Elijah Badger put up coming into this Florida Gators offense with what I think is one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC, Graham Mertz, slinging the pill to him? I look at Elijah Badger and say, I think this is a massive fit. And although a lot of the conversation is regarding Cormani McClain, he's one of the bigger names in college football, I look at Elijah Badger and say that is a massive, massive potential lad for the Florida Gators. And if you're a Florida fan, you feel pretty good about it, right? He's taken some other visits, Arizona, Washington, getting him on campus this late in the process. Again, he's going to try to enroll for summer workouts. I think the time is ticking on Elijah Badger. The fact that he's not committed has made his way to on campus for the Florida Gators. If you're Florida, you're feeling damn good about your chances for Elijah Badger committing to the Florida Gators. As always, we'll continue to update you guys if the commitments happen. We'll be breaking them down. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. It's been a blast talking this program. You guys have shown a ton of support. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.